Welcome to the Fac Dev Lounge podcast, your faculty development podcast for Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick. Join me today with my guest, Nisal Karunaratne from the UK. He's a third-year medical student and published a paper recently with his sister, who's a surgical resident in Britain, The Implications of Hearing Loss on a Medical Student, a Personal View and Learning Points for Medical Educators. I really enjoyed my conversation with him, and I think even achieved my favorite answer to a question, so we'll see if you can pick it out. Thanks very much for joining us today, and here's the podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fac Dev Lounge podcast. I'm so excited to be back with you now on the podcast in 2021. I have a special guest here today from the other side of the pond, as we say, from the UK, and he is a medical student there. His name is Nisal Karunaratne, and we're very excited to have him here. I actually found him by email when I was looking at some articles about medical teaching and was so inspired by one that he authored, which is obviously very personal to him. We'll have the link in the show notes, of course, but it's The Implications of Hearing Loss on a Medical Student, a Personal View and Learning Points for Medical Educators. Nisal, you've been so generous with your time to chat with me so we can learn from you. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you wrote your article?
Hi guys, humble greetings from the UK. I hope you're all well. I'm a third-year medical student at Brighton and Sussex Medical School, which is in Brighton. And after experiencing a lot of interesting things and challenges about learning medicine in a medical school environment and the hospitals, I decided with my sister to write a paper on what is it like to learn with medicine with a hearing loss. So first of all, I applied to medicine before this is my second attempt of getting a medical school. The first time I got in, I didn't get in. And after that, I did a degree in biomedical sciences. And then after that, I was successful in my application. So for the first 2 years in medical school, it was mainly lecture-based. And for the lectures, I have what we call an induction loop. So the lecturer gets to wear a microphone-like aid around their neck, and this creates a wireless loop connecting their voice to my hearing aid, so I can hear them much more clearly, and it drowns out the background noise. So it was going well for the first 2 years, and then third year is the clinical year, where you have to do a lot of placements in hospitals and ward rounds with the consultant or various doctors. And it was then I found it particularly challenging because it was a very fast-track environment with a lot of background noise, and there were messages going about all over the place. So I had to make a lot of improvisations and asked a lot of help to help me hear, and so which will help me not to miss out on a lot of information and save me a lot of time when I get back home. So most of the challenges I found was talking to patients themselves. So a lot of the patients in the UK are quite elderly and with a lot of chronic issues and comorbidities. And they're also very soft-spoken. And when I first did my ward round, I realized that I just couldn't hear what they were saying. And with the COVID protection in place and everyone wearing face masks, that even made it worse. So I was really depending on my device, the microphone device, so I can just give it to them and they wear it around the neck and everything's sorted out. But with the current PPE rules in place, I can't do that anymore. So this left me with only one option, was to ask the colleagues of doctors that I'm shadowing with at the moment to help them relay what the patient was saying. And so far, I met some really nice doctors who were really helpful in the approach, and some not so nice doctors, especially consultants who had quite difficult personalities. So I had to do a lot of reading on my own or talk to patients outside hospital hours to help me regain the information that I've lost. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So it has been quite a roller coaster of a ride, but I think there have been more ups and downs. And I'm quite adamant and hopeful that after COVID, it should get better. So at the moment, I'm doing my surgical placements, so in theatres at the moment. And so far, the surgeons have been really nice, and they have been very accommodating of my hearing loss. So far, I've been able to hear pretty well in the theater environment.
Well, you you answered so many of the questions that I was going to ask you, and it's so wonderful because I mean, COVID, even before COVID, of course, there is, like you say, the soft-spoken elderly person who may have hearing loss themselves, I guess, too, and so then which adds another dynamic.
Yes,
Yeah. And so, as a pediatrician myself, I don't always have to deal with that issue, but certainly COVID has doubled down on that. You can't even lip read anymore, really.
very true. Yeah, definitely.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, I mean, there's lots of reasons why your story is really captivating and really inspiring, actually, just to show your commitment to sustain your engagement with your education. I thought it was important for this podcast, which is about faculty development, to really raise the issue of accommodations, if you will. Like for our medical students, we're so blessed to have diversity on a lot of different levels for our students. But, you mentioned that there are people who seem to help be more helpful than others, if that's the most diplomatic way to say it, but some who aren't that helpful. What
Yes.
distinguishes those two groups? Like, what could I say to my faculty is something that makes enough space for you or is helpful for you?
I think the only thing that distinguishes those people is the hierarchy of the ranks in the NHS. So it's mainly the consultant and people who are old school that hasn't been exposed to like the progressive or modern nature of the hospital environments. So they're still back in
Mm.
what do you say, the Middle Ages, and don't have a good idea of the widening access to medicine. So the UK is creating this widening access to medicine program where a lot of people from poor socioeconomic backgrounds have more opportunities to get into medical school, and a lot of
Mhm.
them have their own problems as well. So a lot of these consultants, how do I say it, don't have a good awareness of the potential students like me coming into medical school. Yes, so the most helpful doctors especially the younger generation, like mainly the junior doctors and the foundation ones and twos, who are like I don't have to tell them that I have a hearing loss. They already notice the moment I walk through the door, and they already asked me this question like, how can we help you hear better? What can we do to accommodate your hearing loss? And can anything be done in the environment, which is something I almost never get from the consultant at all. So yeah.
Did the medical school offer in some way to kind of equip you with like a strategy? I'm sure the early years were a bit easier if you were sitting in a lecture, like you mentioned, I know we use with kids with hearing loss things like FM systems and stuff, but did they kind of say like here's a script to give people, or did they forward that information to your preceptors before?
So the medical school for anyone who has disability or dyslexia, you're given a personal development plan. So they do an assessment in first year and check all the things that need requirement, and then they create a plan to help you in education. So my medical school gave me a card, looks something like this. I'm not quite sure if you
Okay.
can see it.
So
And
just I'm seeing it's kind of like a laminated card of like I'm assuming kind of like what your requirements are.
my requirements, my difficulties, and what can be done to help me aid in my learning. So I can, without
Okay.
wasting time trying to explain to the consultant, I can just give them the card, and if they want to read it, they can. If they don't want to read it, then so be it. I can find someone else who's more accommodating.
Oh my oh my gosh. Okay. So in the UK, I mean, I know for sure you're being assessed and evaluated. Do you guys have an opportunity to evaluate and assess your preceptors? Like is that happening?
So after every lecture or seminar room, we are given the opportunity to do a feedback for the doctor. So from there, we can write about any concerns or highlights that were good about it, and they make sure that we remain anonymized. So if anyone has to write something really bad about them, they won't track us down and hopefully be angry at us in the future.
Yeah, but okay, but if you write down they didn't read my accommodation card and like deal with the issues around my hearing loss, I'm going to wager that they're going to figure out it's you.
They could figure out it's me, but I think that would be the least of my problems at the moment. But
Oh my gosh. I'm just captivated by that, right? We spend so much time and energy trying to like anonymize people, make students feel safe, all of this sort of stuff. But then at the end of the day, something
yeah,
that's a unique challenge, but not really I mean, I don't mean to make it smaller than it is, but I feel like it's definitely figure outable, how to facilitate your learning now becomes like almost stigmatizing. I don't mean to be dramatic, but do you feel that way?
um, I have to say I have quite enjoyed the attention I've been receiving with the trouble I've been causing at the hospital. So
That is my favorite podcast answer.
I've had a couple of doctors who are really annoyed at me, but the medical school says that I have to make my learning and education a priority over their personal opinions. So, which is something that I'm going to stick to in the future.
Oh my gosh. And so then this turns into your superpower, right? So you bring a
Yes.
strength to the table, which is like a maturity about your learning and resilience that I've taught long enough to know doesn't come naturally to all the medical students, respectfully. Wow, you've flipped this on its head and said, "This is what I bring to the table." Imagine what beautiful things you bring with your lived experience for those people who have hearing loss, right? The old grannies and the grandpas who come in.
I have to say, I've received some compliment from the doctor saying that because I have a good experience lip reading and being more aware of the body language of my patients, I have been quite useful in their elderly settings, and especially people who can't have the laryngeal surgery and can't talk anymore. So I'm better more at verbal
Mm.
communication and bodily communication compared to the consultant themselves. So some of them have actually praised that I have been helping in the ward rounds.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And just bringing that, like I say, strength to the table, I think is just amazing. And you want to do surgery, you said.
So so far the
Maybe I shouldn't
surgical
say that out loud. That's something that's been published. You can do whatever you want. You are allowed to change your mind. But you mentioned surgery to me at one point.
I think it's too soon to tell at the moment, but so far the surgical environment has been quite appealing and have been at least problematic compared to all the rest, and I'm quite liking it at the moment. So yeah,
This may be a sensitive question, and so you can take a pass. You can always take a pass. You mentioned at the beginning of
oh
your
no worries.
story. You mentioned at the beginning of your story about not getting into medicine the first time around, and that happens to many. So we don't
Yeah.
need to make it be about your hearing loss. But do you have any thoughts on where your thoughts went when you didn't get in? I'm not totally familiar with the process in the UK, so was there an interview or was there some sort of scenario that you felt you might have been, it may have been the prejudice of your hearing loss?
So the reason why I didn't get in was because of the interview, and they had some doubts considering that I have a hearing loss, whether I can cope with the medical course and cope with the intensive medical course. And then after that, then I decided to go down the science part and become a scientist. And then the only reason why I reapplied again because I read about a student on the BBC News who had a profound hearing loss and also blind, and completely blind in one eye as well. And she was in her fourth year of medical school in Cardiff. Yes, and I'm thinking if she can do it, then why
Right?
can't I? Yes.
And now some like crazy Canadian has you on her podcast, and like who knows who you're inspiring right now?
I'm hoping I can inspire a lot of people. Yeah.
What does it have to do with your hearing loss about whether or not you can do the work?
After reading her bio and all the things that she had done to help making her learning easier, so reading a braille, using a very special stethoscope, I think that there were also a couple of other things as well. But considering that she made it to fourth year of medical school and she passed all her exams, including her OSCEs and the practical exams, I'm like, there shouldn't be any limits to what a person can want. And if you put your mind to your goal, then you can achieve it.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Your article was really nice. It talked about a lot of these things that you've mentioned already. Who was your co-author?
So my co-author was my sister, who is currently a core surgical trainee in ENT. She told me about a lot of difficulties in patients with hard of hearing, and so then I decided, why can't we write a paper describing what it's like to study medicine with a hearing loss, and so it just kicked off from there.
She's a big support then for you.
Oh yeah, without her I wouldn't have got this far, so I thank her a lot.
So we had to do the shout out to Dilhara. She's eventually going to listen, I would wager.
Probably.
This podcast is for faculty. I always kind of hope that the higher ups listen to it too, and the medical students. I heard you mention that the faculty can, I think, ask you what you need. And you mentioned medical students too. Your colleagues can say, what can we do to make it easier? And read the information that you've been providing to them. If somebody hands you a card that has their things on it, take a minute to read it. I don't know if we do that as much as we probably have conversations to forward that information to those. But and then the higher ups, I guess it's just being open to realizing what a contribution those with different abilities can have in our medical school and community.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, from what I've seen in medical school, because of the diversity of our year group and each and everyone having their strengths, we've been told that the medical students are the most progressive and most understanding of patients compared to the other medical schools in the UK.
Oh, so your own medical school, how would they judge that? They just judge that by the diversity of the students?
They judge on the patient feedback.
Oh, patient feedback. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Oh, that's fantastic. Hey, do we do patient feedback like that? I have no idea. Okay, anybody who's listening to this, let's do that, because we have surveys in the hospital that are a little bit more about patient experience, but we always talk about that 360 evaluation of arguably the most important experience, which is that of the patient. But then, to really look at the medical students. I love that. Thanks for that idea.
No worries. Happy to help.
Maybe we're doing it already, and they'll be like, Sarah, we do that all the time. I'll be like, okay, I'd love to see the results then. So we have a lot to learn from you guys, at least, because that's, it hasn't been my experience that I've had a student with hearing loss that I've known of, but I have worked with allied staff, social workers, nurses, and whatnot who do. And I just love that line, what can I do to make it easier? Give me some tips, and just being open and a little bit of vulnerability there can go a long way. I think the experience from your lens, hearing loss or vision impairment, if I'm using terms correctly, is, something that's a little bit more tangible than, say, other different abilities of students. I'm a pediatrician. I deal a lot with ADHD or mood disorders or mental illness. And I just think about the underlying things that aren't as obvious for our students. So maybe rather than targeting different people with their different abilities, we should be asking all people, what do you need from me to make this experience work for you?
Yes, I think that should be the main message.
Well, maybe we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Nisal, for your time and for your contribution, and best of luck with your studies and wherever those take you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I mean, my main parting message would be progressive, be modern, and be insightful. And also learn more today than you did yesterday, and always help people in need, and you'll be surprised how far that will get you in the end. So, yes.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for your time, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Fact Dev Lounge podcast. Please leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or SoundCloud, and even a comment on some ideas for future podcasts. Thank you very much, and have a great day.